I have 3 older sisters, so I always have to listen to what folks I need to do. So, Mom passed away on Thursday, and then each of the 3 nights after, we got together with family and friends, said prayers, and talked about our loss and how much there was about my mother to celebrate. And so that morning process for my family has been a really spiritually uplifting time for us. And now we wanted to bring in the people that knew my mom and go forward with her legacy. It's really hard to talk about my mom because she wasn't one person. She was intensely involved in so many things. Here in Albuquerque, out on the reservation in Torreon, earlier in the years in Washington, D.C., and even before that as a child. So there's many different Rosamunds that we all knew, and it's really hard. I don't even know all those Rosamunds. So to sum it up is impossible. As we did each night, I'm going to light candles for her so we can remember. My hand is shaking and I'm not lighting candles. There we go.
Thank you, Chris.
Got it. There we go. If we could bow our heads and find our silence. My mom was born in Pueblo, Colorado in 1928. So she's a child of the Depression, and where she grew up was on the border of the Dust Bowl. And that experience, I think, formed her forever, being an elementary school child in the 30s in Pueblo, Colorado. They didn't have any money, but that's not what she remembered. What she remembered was, because they had a farm that was irrigated by the Arkansas River, they always had food. And that was very significant because the displaced people were coming by all the time. And she told us about, more than once, feeding young men and whole families as they passed through. The way she said it was, we had to feed them because we could. Mom never saw poverty as a personal flaw. Your merit had nothing to do with what money was in your pocket. She always saw people who needed help, and she felt obligated to help. That obligation motivated great success, but she was frustrated. And she was often sad because there was so much to change. And she could understand what needed to change, and nothing would change fast enough for her. And my experience as a child with her, a young adult with her, at some point I think she recognized me as an adult also. I'm not sure. What happened was she fought that sadness of seeing a hurtful world by embracing the beauty around her and her family. Mom used to call me, and this was pretty regular, and say, "Quick, go outside. The sunset is beautiful." And I'd walk outside with a phone, and we would talk about the shades of color. And she had names for every shade of color. She saw different than I did. Every season, there was something that we had to go see. When we lived in D.C., we always saw the cherry blossoms. Here, when it was time for the aspens to turn, it was an immediate crisis. We need to go see the aspens. But she didn't see the aspens. She felt the aspens. She would talk to me about how the light changed as the sun came through the yellow leaves. She knew what the ground under the aspens smelled like and could talk about it. Her senses were so acute. She would remember for us how the aspen leaves, the paper blowing in the breeze. And all of that would happen in the 10 minutes that she could take out of the car. She really celebrated her grandchildren, and they never did anything wrong. And one of the great joys of her life was to take them on adventures. Although I was reminded this morning by Andrew that each adventure had a teaching moment. Playing cards with Mom was quite an experience. The first thing you had to know was she would profess that she doesn't know this game, no matter how many times she played it, or even if she taught it to you. When you sat down, she would say, well, I don't think I remember the rules. I don't think I know how to play. And so we would go through the rules, and she would start to play, and immediately would lay down a hand and say, oh, is that good? As she stomped you to the ground, and she would win. And she'd say, we've got to play cards again. Mom always answered the phone, and I heard her answer the phone with so many of my children, my nephews, my sisters. She always answered the phone the same way. It was surprise, delight. Oh, hi, sweetie. I can always hear that voice. She truly had to have that beauty to be able to do the work she did. Mom really loved to cook, and she took it to a level that was incredible. We would talk about what we're going to have for 3 days before we had the dinner party. And she would call me and say, well, I know Andrew doesn't like lamb. Maybe I'll cook him a hamburger. And I'm going to have the greens that Alex has always liked. And do you think they'll try? And then she'll name something that I've never heard of. And it was always an adventure. And she'd cook it all. She'd lay it out. And then she'd kind of say, I know it's not very good, but it's all I could do. And it would be this sumptuous feast. And we would all sit down, and I'll never forget how that would happen. Once everyone was sat, we had a glass of water, all of the little troubles to get people to sit down were done. And she'd look around the table, she'd see her grandsons, and she'd look at me and she'd say, Charlie, let's give thanks. She was thankful for her life, and I'm thankful I knew her.
Hi, everyone. Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Diane, Rosamund's oldest, the Vermont daughter, as I'm called. And Mom talked to me about so many of you, and it's really wonderful to be together to celebrate her life. I really feel Mom is here with us in this place. This was so important to her vision and her beliefs. Thanks, Suzanne, and all of you who helped bring us together today. And my mom would just love this. This is her. And as I reflect on Mom, what stands out for me, and I'm the oldest, so it's a little different than what Charlie. We all figured out that we all had different Rosamunds and moms. And as I reflect on my mom, what stands out for me is that she was always ahead of her time. As a woman, a mother, an elder woman, as she used to remind me, and a community member. And she wanted folks to get it right, and for our world. And she was impatient, like Charlie said, about when is it going to get right. And she was always concerned about human rights, education, the environment, the economy. She had a lot of interests. She always worked for change. And the older I get, I appreciate and I understand more growing up with service, And activism is just part of our daily fabric of life. And this was not easy in the 50s and 60s in the Virginia suburbs, I gotta tell you. She had a lot of courage, and we were right there with her. We were a wheat germ on your apple crisp and everything else family. And the neighbor kids had fluff and Wonder Bread. So that tells you a little bit. Some of my earliest memories are helping Mom register people to vote, walking door to door to campaign for school board candidates. And Charlie's reminding me of the houses that had the candidates that we weren't in favor of. We would not go to those houses. And we would be trekking longer to the other houses. Charlie and I were comparing
So
notes
long
on
distance between progressives. And
Yes, it was a long, yes, a very long distance between the progressives in Northern Virginia at that time. Growing up outside Washington, D.C., we marched in support of Martin Luther King. Children in poverty, families was always at the top of my mom's list. As I said earlier, it took me a long time to figure out how differently we grew up than other people. I mean, I knew we weren't eating the fluff, but the significance of it has really sunken in more and more as I've had my own children and raised them. Mom focused her energy and sustained her interests locally and also in the larger community and globally. Kind of amazing. Throughout her life, this was not a retirement project. This was what you did forever and ever. And she was a lifelong learner. And she had an enormous influence on who I am as an adult, and this is clear to anybody that knows both of us. And the other thing I always will remember about my mom is she embraced the life my family and I built in rural Vermont. Well, most of my friends' parents were coming up and going, oh my God. They really couldn't understand the draw, like she did, of tight communities, town meetings, politics really close to the ground, and the natural beauty of the land. The beauty was so different than here. More recently, I've been able to be part of my mom's, as we call it, wraparound with my siblings, and I want to thank my siblings for doing this. I was the long distance part of the wraparound, and they were the on the ground wraparound. And every day she was wrapped in love from all of us, along with Laddie and Cito, of course. And I'm just grateful for the time we had to deepen our friendship and love. And she was just really a good friend. And I'm just going to miss sharing with her every day.
In which we were supposed to limit ourselves. I think what I focused on more was some more specific things. Charlie and Diane did just a great job of summing up so much about her and her love of nature and her activism and her cooking, all those things. Wow. And I'm Joyce, the youngest daughter, and I live here in Albuquerque. And I also know that having this here, this remembrance for her would have been so meaningful to her. And my mom committed her life to working for justice. We've all said that. As a child, I experienced also a forward-thinking mother who never accepted things as they were, but worked tirelessly for how they should be. A concrete way for me as a young child to learn this was by seeing that I had the only parent that we knew who didn't accept the status quo of segregation. She instead took a personal stand in the 1960s and wouldn't let us children go to the local movie theater or join the local neighborhood swimming pool because they were segregated. A bit later, after she started her government work, creating the Head Start preschools for children affected by poverty, talk about that float around the dinner table. During those conversations, I further witnessed my mother's deep commitment to righting social injustices. For me, this has always been a great source of pride about my mother, that she had an important role in creating those now very well-established Head Start preschools nationally. And she did it for children who weren't born into opportunity. She knew that they were, like Charlie said, we were all like, and we all deserved that. We all deserved that. And this has most recently influenced me or most certainly it's influenced me in my work with very young children with disabilities. And I think of my mother every time I go to a Head Start center and do some work there. And all of this focus on that, I realized, was because of my very last conversation with my mother, which I feel privileged that I had, and that it was our last conversation, because much of our interaction in the last 9 months was talking about medical needs, household needs, and taking care of those things. So that conversation is now very precious to me. Recently, I've been reminded of the riots after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and some of those occurred within miles of our home near Washington, D.C. Since I had only childhood memories of that time, I asked her about her memories. And as she talked, the most meaningful thing to her was that in Watts, California, it was virtually all burned down, but they did not touch the Head Start centers. Those stood. And she said those people really loved those preschools. And I really enjoyed that moment with her because I could see that she was just so proud and felt such a sense of accomplishment that she had done that. And I was able to share in feeling my pride of my mother to them. She brought such goodness in so many lives. So we've all experienced my mother's deep commitment to advocating for quality of life for all, that we live in a profit-driven world. And this week I've reminisced about a few of my mother's all-consuming projects because there were many. In the 80s, it was preventing irradiated sludge from being spread on our local parks. And she was insisting that we all buy water-saving shower heads and toilet dams 35 years ago. So I think we can all agree that she never missed a teaching opportunity, whether you asked for it or not. So finally, I think I'll just paraphrase what a friend of mine who worked with her said to me this week. And he says, whenever I have a difficult decision, I think of your mother. That always helps me to see what is the right and principled thing to do. So we will all miss her. Debbie?
And I'm the second daughter. And as I look out over this group, I realize I know a lot of you. Because when I would come to visit my mother, I didn't have a job or children or even my new husband with me. I would just spend time with my mom. So I would go to all of the meetings that she would go to and the potlucks. And I enjoyed so much getting to know all of you over the years. Even though I never actually resided in Albuquerque, I feel that this is definitely my home. Thank you for being such wonderful friends to our mother. You are like family as much as we are. We recognize that. And we very much appreciate all that you gave to her through the years, how you uplifted her when she felt especially upset about the events in the world, and how you laughed with her as things started to change and shared with her ideas and knowledge and growth, all of which were so important to her. She lived in a world of ideas, and her intellect was so strong, and all of you just were there with her. And she said that she was so happy that she had found this group of people here, that it was such a, not just a nurturing group, but a group that was really working for change in a very big way, in a very positive way, regardless of how old people were. And I don't know if Jack Pickering is in the hall, but he's 95, and he had planned to come today if he could. Maybe he didn't make it. And she just knew so many wonderful people. I helped her. I was her editor a little bit and proofreader for the Trial Balloon when she was working on that newspaper. And so I knew more people even through that organization. And also Andrew and Alex, there were others among the family, we acted as her computer experts, and because she took on a big task with a whole board of people, but there we were in her house trying to put together, do the rough draft of the layout and all of that. It was really, really fun for us to join with the community in that way. I hadn't planned to say anything in particular except that I heard a Sanskrit phrase sometime, I think in the early 90s, and it goes, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, and it means the whole world is my family. And our mother lived that through her whole life. From a very young age, she recognized that our family is not our nuclear family or even our community or our nation. It's the entire world. It's every religion, every culture. Every person is important. And she taught that to us very deeply. And I think that changed all of us. And we've carried that through our lives, and we will continue to carry that. The whole world is my family. And also I believe that a mother's love is supreme, constant, and eternal. So we will always have that connection with our mother. And really the whole world, all 7 billion people will be blessed on the level of consciousness by my mother's love for the whole world. I don't know if my time's up. In addition to the many wonderful friends she has in this hall, I wanted to mention 4 friends that couldn't come today, who have been friends with her for at least 4 decades. In one case, Joan Crawford, who lives in Los Angeles. She has been friends with Mother since the early 60s, when Charlie and her son Michael first, and Joyce, were all part of the cooperative preschool there in Arlington, Virginia. And our families became friends, and we took camping trips together on the beaches up and down the East Coast. And she has remained a steadfast friend of my mother's through all of these decades. So we wanted to mention her name. Also, Jonathan Teague, if I'm not mistaken, he was my mother's architect professor. No, he was.
I think they met during courses during that time.
My mother was a graduate student at UNM for a period of time when she first came to New Mexico. And one of her professors, Jonathan Teague, has remained a best friend all of these 40 years. And we'd like to honor him. Also, a friend of the family, Robert Moses. The whole Moses family has been very good friends to our family since the late 60s. And he has also kept in very close touch with my mother, even though he resides in Maryland. And finally, a very dear friend with whom she shares a special connection always, Andrew White III. He's a gifted, accomplished musician, both jazz, classical, and really all genres of music, who lives in Washington, D.C. And she met him during the chapter of her life that was going to all of the different jazz clubs in D.C. during the 60s. And they have been very close friends now for 45 years, along with his wife Jocelyn. So we wanted to mention them as well. And now I think, now we're inviting all of the family with no exceptions to come forward, and we're going to sing one of the songs that we used to sing with my mother, our parents, around the campfire on camping trips. A very simple song, but it's one that our mother really enjoyed.
Music is not to be performed. Music is for participation. Share. Okay. Down in the valley, so low, hang your head over, hear the wind blow, hear the wind blow, dear, hear the wind blow, hang your head over, hear the wind blow, brothers and sisters.
in heaven know I love you. Know I love you, dear. Know I love you. Angels in heaven know I love you. I know you love me. Don't say it, please. Put your arms round me. Give my heart ease. Give my heart ease, love. Give my heart ease. Put your arms round me. Give my heart ease.
Thank you.
She is was such a dear friend to me, but I know that they have already covered a lot of the wonderful things that she's accomplished, but I can't help but add to that all of the things that she did immediately for us in this community. She had so much respect for all people with different cultures and different belief systems, and she was able to, in terms of justice, which is the basis of everything she did, she was able to bring us together in a community here where we could work together better. It's not to say we didn't run into problems with different personalities, but hers was so engaged in cooperation that it wasn't going to get lost because of a few little problems with personalities. But in any case, there were so many things, caring, giving, supporting all of us, that were just so outstanding. I think of Rosamund as having the kind of energy that could keep us all going. And so we did a lot of community things, and to work in all of these organizations, because she was such a lover of nature and had the care of our air, our water, our food particularly, when there was, all of this happening, the GMO stuff of genetically modified organisms, and we had to get out and educate people about this, according to Rosamund, and we did. Because she wasn't going to allow all of these wonderful foods that we needed to have to nourish our bodies go down the tubes because of corporate greed. So that was a biggie. And there were just so many things that was so supportive of each of us. For me, it was like, how does she do it? Where does all of this energy come from? And yet, it was always available to us. And so I really love this idea of celebrating Rosamund's life. We are going to miss her so much. It's one of those things that you think, well, there's nobody else like that. and yet her spirit is still with us and can give us a lot of strength and a lot of hope to keep going.
Democracy is not a spectator sport. And it's a little like living on a farm, you know, there's always work to be done. And Rosamund got that. She got that. And one time, she and I were talking about her growing up during the Depression, and she said, well, we did okay, but you know, my father decided to take up farming, and he didn't know anything about farming, and she just shook her head. It was like, well, it worked out, but she seemed amazed by the audacity of the undertaking at the time, I think, you know. And she was like that. She would marvel at the audacity of political opponents and some of the people she worked with. Both, you know, that was, it was one of the most fascinating things about working with Rosamund. She personified what I think is the epitome of what it means to be a citizen. She was well-read and informed and critical in the very best sense of the word. And as you guys know, she's fearless in communicating her views. Couple of, you know, there's an outfit from Washington that decided to be a good idea to move the entire nuclear weapons complex to New Mexico. And they spent a lot of money putting together a fancy report. And we exposed that a few years ago to study group for colleagues. And at a meeting right here in this room, there was someone that thinks of himself as an activist was here. And they were going on at length. And they were talking through their hat, I'll say to be polite. And Rosamund finally stood up and said, "You don't read, you don't know anything." Sound familiar?
Yes.
Well, the thing with working with activists is that they're always right.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
They're always right.
Yep.
And Rosamund and I had this disagreement a few years ago because the workers at the co-op were trying to unionize the shop. And I thought of you, Diane, because she had a very strong view about this based on your experience with the Onion River Co-op in Burlington, which I was a member of the Onion River Co-op.
Oh.
So I can relate to this. And I was sitting out, I'm going out with my guitar, playing in front of the stores, handing out leaflets about how I wanted us to support our workers unionizing, you know. And of course the co-op hired a union busting lawyer.
Not true.
This is.
I love you, Robin.
We do too.
So anyway, we had a sit down and we spent about 2.5 hours exchanging views. And neither one of us moved an inch. We thunk what we thunk, and that was it, you know. And at the end of it, we hugged, and that was the end of it. And Rosamund gave wonderful hugs. But like everything else, she was all in.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, there you go.
So I loved her. Once in a while, she would call me on the phone because we're both board members of the study group. And she would express her frustration about her inability to make more substantive contributions to the study group. And I don't mean economically, financially. I mean to do what she was great at, like tabling, for instance, right? She loved tabling at events, and I would hear her out, and give her empathy, And I'd say, well, I really want you to stay on the board. And she would say, well, sometimes I wonder why. That's all, Peter. And I say, because your perspective is worth $1 million.
My name is Jean, and I'm with a group called Stop the War Machine. And Rosamund was just a pillar of Stop the War Machine. I guess I'd like to start by saying whoever put that slideshow together, I thought that was just absolutely wonderful. I couldn't stop looking at it, and the thing that always strikes me about Rosamund is that beautiful smile, you know. And I could not stop watching the pictures, and she was just movie star beautiful, I think. And that smile was just ever present, and it just showed who she was. And I just remember her smiling almost every time I talked with her. Even when she was talking about painful things, she was smiling.
It's wonderful to see so many of Rosamund's friends here, and I think that it really shows what one person with that kind of determination and those kind of decent human values can do. She was a stand-up person, as far as I know, that contributed in everything she did. She, in every relationship, Rosamund was a person who contributed and who gave. And she did it without any fanfare, no self-consciousness. It was so deep in her character. I think she had refined what was important down to the point where it could reach other people, because it's it's what they at bottom think but haven't quite come to live out yet. But she did. She was firm, as everybody knows. And so when I think of her, I think of that kind of dogged but graceful perseverance that she brought. She didn't have any sort of heaviness about her. She always seemed to have good humor, no matter what. Even in grief. I mean, she really grieved about our world and the things that she couldn't make better quickly. But that just goes to show she was nobody's fool, as we all know. She seemed in a time where everything seemed so narcissistic. She wasn't. She seemed that older style that keeps your miseries to yourself and make sure that you are contributing something positive and sunny to the situation, was something that I think we all saw, and certainly part of her particular genius. That at one time that might have been called just good manners or noblesse oblige, but in a way she made that nobility herself. It seemed like she wasn't running around wildly, but when she knew her strength was not infinite, she was also quite skillful in how she used her energy and her strength in the community. And looking back now, I see her as pretty strategic in how she helped also. I am vividly remembering a conversation that she had with myself and Peter and Trish about activism in Albuquerque in the 70s and 80s. I was drinking it up because she saw and experienced and processed and thought about a lot of things which we were completely ignorant of. And that's something that she brought to us, that long experience. Really listened to Rosamund. We were, of course, everybody knows how much of the trial balloon she put on her own shoulders because the conditions were such that couldn't get other people, couldn't quite get that load shifted to enough other shoulders. Well, I'm very glad to have known Rosamund, and I'm also sorry that we didn't have more of those long conversations. I was like maybe most of the rest of you. I was thought she was getting better, and we just drank those up, and we'll try to carry her vision forward. We're very conscious that we have to challenge ourselves as Rosamund did. We are very conscious of the generation gap that we have in the peace and justice community here. That the qualities, how hard she worked and how much we have to work to bring other people along that will help carry values that she had. I suppose that's about it. I know that she would want us to be not so much to grieve as to learn and keep going. I was thinking of that. I love the sad but beautiful lines of Friedrich Ruckert. A little light went out in my tent. Hail to the gladdening light, of course.
My name is Rose Shaw, and I was active. In fact, I got to know Rosamund through the Great Panthers. I didn't know her before that, so I've known her for about 10, 12, something like that, years. At one time, she was the coordinator of the group, and another time I was. So that's how we got to know each other. And I don't want to repeat what I've learned a lot today. I did know some of the things about her. And by the way, 2.5 years ago, she spoke at my husband's memorial when he died. Very graciously, she spoke for the Great Panthers. So I, feel this is part of the Great Panthers that I'm speaking to. I did learn through her about her previous activities, and I just admired her so, and everything that was said about her was true. The one thing I want to say that even though she, had a lot of conviction and, like everybody said, she always thought she was right, but she was not self-righteous. I think there's a distinction there. She didn't, she didn't look down on people who didn't agree with her. She was democratic to the core, and when others decided to do that was well done. So she's also very humane. I know she had good relationships with the neighbors on her street. Like she had a woman who lived across the street from her, a very elderly woman who was very frail and handicapped, and she was always worried about her. By the way, politically they were completely opposite. But she was always concerned about that woman, and she would always go over there and make sure that her medical cares were met and everything like that. And that was the way she was. So, and in our own organization, we always took pride in the fact the Great Panthers is a national group, and it was founded fighting ageism, but it also, fights for all kinds of social justice, racism, sexism, everything else. And we were proud of the fact that of all the organizations we belonged to, it was the least, it had the least, what's the word? When people within the organization start to argue with each other.
Strike.
Strike. We're that way. I mean, we avoided pettiness to a great extent, and we were very proud of that. And even after we weren't coordinators anymore, we both stayed on the board. We were sort of the glue that held the group together. So I don't want to repeat everything else that was said, but I'll always remember her as being like there was a direct line between what she thought and what she did. Always, it's just like there was no in between for her. It was always that way.
Thank you.
I thought that during this week, I thought frequently that we ought to have some sort of a support group started. And the criteria for being in the support group would be that you spent at least an hour or more a week on the phone with Rosamund. Because those were just wonderful discussions, and I know that she had them with many people. And they were tailored to the person, for what was going on with that person. And for our discussions, I loved talking about issues with her. It was just an amazingly wonderful experience. And yes, we played the Ain't It Awful tape frequently, but it always ended up with, okay, so what are we going to do about this? What's the best thing? As Greg said, she was very strategic. And so we were constantly trying to think of the ways that we could be effective. And it was a treasure. I thought, okay, those of you want to get together next week at Hyder Park, let's talk about this. Because we certainly have a big gap in our lives in order, with that opportunity to really talk about issues and go through those.
There's so many people that want to say something, and I think we'll share together. We had a song to close, and there's going to be a violin, and we need to include. So, on your song sheet, "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple." All right. Well, if you stay in the, you have to sing louder if you stay there. My mother was always very proud of the boys who were actually educated singers. So we need to do it. Yeah. I'll hold the music for you if you want.
There is.
Oh.
It's a gift to be free. It's a gift to come down where you ought to be. And when we find ourselves in a place just right, we will be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right.
I'm glad that Charlie talked about trees, because I thought about these two songs about trees when I thought about Rosamund. And I wanted to read you some of the words. The first one is called Linden Leaf, and I'll just read a few of the words. Within the woodlands, flowery bladed by the oak tree's mossy root, the shining grass blades, timber shaded, now do quiver underfoot. And birds do whistle overhead, and water's bubbling in its bed. And there for me the apple tree do lean down low in Linden Leaf. Let other folk make money faster,
in air dark-blue towns. I don't dread a peevish master, though no man may heed my frowns. I'd be free to go abroad or take again my homeward road, to where from me the apple tree do lean down low in linden leaves.
And the second is called the ash grove. You may know it. The ash grove, how graceful, how plainly 'tis speaking. The wind through it playing as language for me. The friends of my childhood again are before me. Each step wakes a memory, as freely I roam. With soft whispers laden, its leaves rustle o'er me. The ash grove, alone is my home.
Thanks everybody for coming, and I know there was a lot of people actually here that traveled a long way, and we really appreciate that you would do that for my mother. And there's some snacks, and let's mingle.
Okay, I remember Rosamund as a wonderful woman and comrade, interested in many of the causes that I am also interested in. I guess I remember her offering support to the Labor Party when we had a Labor Party here in New Mexico for a short time. I also remember her taking part in a class that several of us undertook to learn about corporations, the history of them, and how they gained strength and became so strong and took control of our government and our media and our lives. And it caused many of us to form a bond in sharing our opinions and doing a lot of talking and learning. And I guess that's one of my fondest memories of Rosamund was in that class. I'll always remember her smile, and I was glad that was mentioned today, that in spite of the difficult struggle, she was able to always see humor in the world and bring smiles to other people.